he went to heaven. That's all I got. He gets up there, he's about ready to enter the pearly gates. St. Peter says, "Whoa, where are you going?" "I'm in heaven, I'm going into the pearly gates." He says, "Oh, no, don't work that way." He says, "You got to have 100 points. 100 points before you can get into those gates." 100 points. He says, "Yeah." He says, "Here's what you got to do." He says, "You got to tell me things that you did good in your life, and then according to how good it was, I'll give you points. And once you get 100 points, you get in." Okay. I can do that. He said, I've been married to my wife for 50 years. I had never cheated on her, not even in my heart. St. Peter said, "Hang on. Cheated on my wife. It's worth 3 points." 3 points! Yep. He says, okay. He says, "I've been to the same church all my life. I've tithed every Sunday, and I've been of service anytime there wasn't anything done. I was there." He said, "Hold on a minute. Service in church, service in tithe. 1 point." 1 point! Oh my goodness. He says, "Okay, this is a big one." He says, I started a soup kitchen in our city, and I helped the homeless veterans find places to live." And he says, "And I was really helpful." Peter said, "All right, soup kitchen, veteran, 2 points." "Oh, no, 2 points, is that it?" He said, Yep. He says, "At this rate, it's going to take the grace of God to get me in." He said, "Come on in." Come on in. We're talking about heaven. Talking about treasures. Beautiful songs. Weren't they gorgeous songs this morning? Woo! Absolutely wonderful. In Ecclesiastes 5:10-16, Solomon is describing our problem with earthly possessions. You say, what's the problem? I love earthly possessions. But he says money in abundance, or money and possessions, do not satisfy. They do not satisfy. They leave a void where your heart used to be. And it also says the abundance of riches prevents good sleep. In other words, if you got a lot of money, you're generally worried about somebody's going to take it. If you own a big corporation, you're worried about espionage, somebody stealing your plans, your new designs. You have a hard time sleeping at night. But it says in verse 12, the sleep of a working person is sweet, whether they eat much or a little. My wife she used to work for GM. She'd come home, get home from work, she'd come through the door. If I wanted to kiss her goodnight, I better get it at the door. Because before her head hit the pillow, she was sleeping. So, the sleep of a working person is good, whether you eat a little or a lot. What that simply means is whether you have much or you have little. But the full stomach of a rich person will not allow them to sleep. Not talking about food so much as it is your possessions. Riches will perish. Riches will perish, and you will not be able to take them with you when you go. I'm sorry. Some of you may be heartbroken now that you just learned that. But you can't tell. I've never seen in my life a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer with everybody's possessions in it to the gravesite. I've never seen it yet. I would rather have a little and be happy than have a lot and be miserable. I'd rather have a little and be happy than have a lot and be miserable. In Matthew 6:19-21, it says, "And Jesus commanded us to lay up treasures not on earth but in heaven." Read this. Stop. Stop. That's a command. Stop storing up your treasures for yourself on earth, where moths and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. Instead, store up your treasures for yourself in heaven, where moths and rust do not destroy and thieves cannot break in and steal. Verse 21. Your heart is where your treasure is. Your heart is where your treasure is. I'm going to save people a lot of money today. If you go to a psychiatrist, fire them. Fire them and just make out the check to me. If you are unhappy and you go to a psychiatrist for figuring out why you're unhappy, let me tell you. Oh yeah, your heart is where your treasure is. If you want to be happy today, where's your treasure? Where's your treasure? Not that it's wrong to have money. Not that it's wrong to have possessions and toys and trinkets and whatever. That's not bad. But our focus today is on your treasures in heaven. Well, I worked hard all my life for my money. And I'm pretty proud of that. All right, I give you that. But who gave you the education? Who gave you the brains to get an education? Who gave you your first job interview? Who gave you your first job? Who kept you from getting laid off? All of these things were done for you. So before you take all the credit, let's give credit where credit is due. Now, we're going to focus this morning on why we should lay up our treasures in heaven, and secondly, how do you lay up your treasures in heaven? In Matthew 16:19 through 1 through 24 tells us the reason why we lay up our treasures in heaven is because earthly treasures are insecure. Earthly treasures, I tell you, are vanishing quickly. Take for instance, moths and rust will destroy it. Material things are perishable. If you are from the north and you own a new car, it will probably rust out on you before you get it paid off. Just things do not last. You can go to the Smithsonian, whatever that is, where they all big stuff and everything's under glass. But anyway, they've got documents up there that are vacuum packed in a glass so air doesn't get to it. It is so old that if air was to touch that document, it would crumble to pieces. Things on earth do not last. Thieves will break in and steal. Material things are subject to theft. Barbara and I were in New York. I went up there for a photography class. I wanted to learn how to do New York-style weddings. And so while we were there, we get a phone call from my daughter. Our house had been broken into, and we've been robbed. They didn't take anything of value because I don't have anything of value. But they took some personal stuff that we can't get back. It's gone. Things do not last. Thieves will break in and steal it. Today is even worse than 20 years ago because the economy is so bad that the only way a person can feed his family or feed his habit is to break into somebody else's house and steal stuff that isn't theirs. And it's on the increase. I met a guy the other day. He said, I have a security system I put in my house. I said, oh, what is it? He said, it's 365 by 357. In case you didn't know what that is. That's 365 days a year by a 365 gun. Magnum. I said, oh. You can't protect everything. You will be out of your house at some time. No, I'm just kidding. Inflation. Your dollar isn't worth what it used to be. Your dollar isn't worth what it used to be. And besides, whatever you have left over, you owe to China. It's not yours. It's not yours. Stock devaluation, bankruptcy, faulty investments are all things that will steal you blind. Treasures in heaven are secure. Treasures in heaven are secure. Neither moth nor rust will destroy. Treasures in heaven are imperishable. 1 Peter 1, 3 and 4. Blessed be God, our Father, of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, and does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. For you. Reserved. What is it? The Buckingham Palace, you ever been there? Anybody been overseas to the Buckingham Palace? There you go. Yeah. And then those guards stand guard there. You can't make them laugh. You can't make them smile. Just stand there. Angels in heaven are guarding your inheritance. It's secure. Thieves cannot break in. They cannot steal it. Your treasure in heaven is where your heart will be. Your treasures in heaven is where your heart will be. It's there where your affections will be, where your hope will be, and where your dreams will be. If your treasure is on earth, you're due for some really disappointing times. If your treasure is on earth, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be let down. If your primary joy is on earth, when it's gone, what do you have? If your primary joy is earthly, when it's gone, what do you have? There is nothing. Your treasure is in heaven. Your heart will not suffer disappointment. Your heart will not suffer breakage. I can't tell you. The other day I was in Walmart. I go there a lot. Not recently, since the accident. But I was in line and I had a few things for the golf outing. I was buying prizes for our give me prizes that we give away. And so I'm standing and I got a little hand card in my hand and I'm in a line that says 20 items or less. And there's a lady over standing just off to the left-hand side of me and she's looking around like, where's the shortest line? I got to get out of here. And she had a cart, not a lot of items, but more than I had. And so I said, ma'am, would you like to skip in front of me here and check out before me? I looked behind me, make sure there was nobody that was going to get upset. She said, certainly I would. So she cut in front of me like that. She said, well, thank you very much. I said, that's all right. I said, this is my good deed for today. Now that I got it out of the way, I can go back to being ornery and crotchety. I did say that. And she laughed. But see, there were little treasures in heaven. I did a good deed. I got me a treasure. One point. Whatever. And I made her laugh. It doesn't take much to make people happy. All right. Where was that? This way, Walmart. Yeah. I need all that. For your treasure is incorruptible, undefiled, and does not fade away. Nothing can take your treasure from you. Nothing can take your treasure from you. It is, according to the Bible, is reserved for you. It is reserved for you in heaven. Kept by the power of God through faith. Hebrews 10:32 through 34. Remember the past. And this is Hebrews, so we don't know who the writer is, but he's talking to some Christian people. And he says, remember the past, when you first learned the truth, or when you first became Christians, you endured a lot of hardship, a lot of pain. Times you were publicly insulted and mistreated. At times you were associated with people who were treated the same way, abused like you. You suffered with prisoners. You must have been thrown in prison. But you were cheerful even though your possessions were stolen. This person, these people he was talking to, didn't care about their worldly possessions. Take it. I don't need it. Since you knew that you have a better and more permanent possession. Woo! if you apply these words that I just read, if you apply them to your heart and to your life, the storms of life will not overwhelm you. The storms of life will not overwhelm you. We've had a lot of passing aways in our family. If your loved ones are possessions, your loved ones are possessions, prized possessions for you, I would tell you today to make sure your treasures are in heaven. Make sure your treasures are in heaven. If your parents are still alive, make sure they know the Lord. If your spouse is still alive, make sure they know the Lord. If your children are alive, make sure they know the Lord. These are your prized possessions. Do not leave home without them. Or do not go home without them. If you have built your house upon the foundation, upon Jesus' word, it says in Matthew 7:24 through 27, therefore, anyone hearing what I say and obeys will be like a person who built his house upon a rock. Rains poured, floods came, winds blew and beat against that house. But it did not collapse because its foundation was on a rock. But anyone who hears my word and does not obey is like a foolish person who built his house upon the sand. Rains poured, floods came, winds blew and struck the house. It collapsed, and the result was total disaster. And the result is total disaster. He's talking about your life. Is it built upon the foundation? Is it built upon God's word? Or are you on sinking sand? In Matthew 19:21, and Jesus said, if you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions, give to the poor, and you will receive treasures in heaven. Then come follow me. Really? You can't be perfect and get into heaven. He was talking to a rich person there who he knew would not give up his possessions. See, he wanted to feel his possessions, touch his possessions, smell and taste his possessions. Jesus said, you've got to give it all up and follow me by faith. And he couldn't live on faith. You need a pure heart. Believe in Jesus Christ. Believe that he died on the cross and rose again. That is what gets you into heaven. We are not to stack up our treasures on earth. We are to put away our treasures in heaven. Put away our treasures in heaven. In Exodus 20, verse 3, God said, thou shalt have no other God before me. Thou shalt have no other God before me. And whatever you have that keeps you from God is what he wants you to give. If you play golf on Sunday morning, that comes between you and God. Whatever comes between you and God, that is what is required of you. There's a lot of people in this church and in this park and in Zephyr Hills and all over the state of Florida who do good things. Who do good things for people. But you just can't walk into the bank, walk back to the vault, and put your money in a safe deposit box. They're going to run you out of there. They're going to say, excuse me, sir, what are you doing? Well, I'm going to put my money in my treasures in this safety deposit box. Well, do you have an account here? Well, I don't know. Well, let's go check. So they go to the big book, full of accounts. And he said, what is your name? My name's Billy Bob. Well, Billy Bob, you see your name's in the book. So he starts putting the page. Billy Bob, your name's in this book. You can go in here and put your treasures in that vault. But Billy Bob, I'm not seeing your name in this book. You can't put your treasures in that vault. Heaven is like that thing. I don't care what good you do. I don't care what good you do. If you don't have an account in heaven, your treasures are perishable. Your treasures are perishable. They will not be worth anything in the end. All of your good deeds, all of your good works will be for naught. You need an account in heaven. I'll show you how to get one of those at the end. Money can't buy you when you're old, a friend when you're lonely, or love grown cold. The wealthiest person is a pauper at times, compared to the man with a satisfied mind. Once I was waiting in fortune and fame, everything that I dreamed for to get a start in life's game. Then suddenly it happened, I lost every dime, but I'm richer by far, with a satisfied mind. Money can buy back your youth when you're old, or a friend when you're lonely, or love grown cold. The wealthiest person is a pauper at times, compared to the man with a satisfied mind. When my life is ended and my time has run out, my friends and my loved ones I'm gonna leave, there's no doubt. But there's one thing for certain: when it comes my time, I'm gonna leave this old